Okay, two terms that you'll probably hear on occasion are top balance or bottom balance. Now, what that means is where are the cells going to be equalized to? Where are they? What's that benchmark where we're going to have all of the cells alike? Are we going to make them all alike at the charge to voltage? Or are we going to make them all alike at the maximum discharge voltage or another voltage at a point that's repeatable? So here would be your minimum cell voltage. We could go right here, again, where it's quite vertical, a repeatable point. That's what you're really most important, is a repeatable point, so that you can match that on every different, every individual cell. So what a BMS does is they top balance it. So it has all the cells have all the cells fully charged. So regardless of what their capacity is, they're all going to be fully charged. That's its goal, is to keep those cells fully charged. They're all together here, and that's what this chart's showing. There's all together, and they're going to be the same. Even if they have different capacity, they're going to discharge pretty much the same all the way till the end. Just before they start to go down that knee, you'll see them start to separate out, and then the first one will go, the next one, the next one. And so what the BMS, if you're going to top balance, you're committed to using a BMS. And how a BMS works is it attaches to each of the cells. So your BMS is going to attach to all of your positives and one of the negatives. So many negatives, depending on the manufacturer. And that's allowing it to get the individual cell voltages. And it needs individual cell voltages because it has to be able to shut things down before the cell with the least capacity reaches its minimum cell voltage. Because if it doesn't, then this cell is toast. And anytime you go past the minimum voltage, the cell's permanently, it's toast. Get rid of it. It's a time bomb after that. So you need to shut it off before the cell gets there, before any one of them gets there. So that's top balancing and how you have to protect on the other end. Now, the other method, and probably not as common today, talk about bottom balancing. What's the difference? Well, bottom balancing is that we take a point slightly above that minimum voltage and we're going to bottom balance all the cells to that point. And with the lithium iron phosphate cells, the minimum voltage is 2.5 volts. And we bottom balance them to 2.75 volts. That's a repeatable point. So what we do is we discharge all the cells to that value, 2.75 volts. So they're all there. Then we install them in the vehicle. They're wired up in series, and then they're charged as a pack. So they all have the same amount of energy put in them, and they all have the same amount of energy taken out of them. Now, when you're charging them, a lot of the manufacturers, and we've been doing this for a long time, over a dozen years, they'll say, like, originally they were up to like 3.75, 3.8 volts when I first started doing all this. But if you looked at the charge and discharge curves, you could see that going beyond a certain point didn't achieve anything. Okay? Saturation, all that. No. What you'll see is that you get past a certain point, they all start splitting off, just like they're doing right here. And what that is they're reaching that full charge, and then their voltage starts to shoot up fast. So we're going to shut it off right at that point. And we found that point to be basically 3.5 volts. So we charge to 3.5 volts. So we balance them here, we charge them to there, and those cells all have the same amount of energy going in and out of them. And for people that say, oh, they'll vary over time, so far we've been doing this as long as anybody. I just know from experience that this is a repeatable thing. It works first time, every time. We've never had an issue, ever. There's lots of different ways to convert a vehicle, and so I'm just giving you some of the, an overview of some of the different methods. And so here we're talking about batteries, and so the two different methods would be top balance or bottom balance. And so EV4U, we've been bottom balancing since 2009. That's the method that we have used since the beginning and continue to use at this time. The other method is to go with a BMS system, which does what we mentioned, and it's the top balance method as far as balancing goes. And if you have any questions, don't put them on the YouTube channel. Address them to info@evforyounow.com. So that's info@evforyounow.com. And we'd be happy to answer any of those questions. Okay? Thanks again for watching. Subscribe. Click the notification button. We're trying this year, at the very end of 2021, we've tried to come out every Sunday. And so we're going to continue to do that. We try to film a lot of stuff at one time. As we get these little opportunities to do so, we film a bunch of videos so that we have this cue to keep us through the times, and we just absolutely there's no way we can do it, which is the majority of the time. So anyway, we're going to try to stay consistent, but hit the notification button anyway, so that even if we're not consistent, you'll still know when we put out a new video. Hope you like the videos. If you don't, let me know. If you do, let me know. If you have suggestions for future videos, let me know. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time. That vehicle, 8 years, no BMS. Okay? My Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, I drove it for 7.5 years, 97,000 miles. You've probably heard me talk about it before. If you go back to early video stuff, I mean, we raced that car numerous times at Laguna Seca and elsewhere. We autocrossed it. It was a daily driver. It was just a workhorse. Went to lots and lots of shows and events. And 97,000 miles. No BMS. And we checked those cells. Those cells are still being used today in my VW Beetle, the red Beetle, Bob. And we test them before we put them into Bob. We brought them all the way down to about here. And they were all within 1/100th of a volt of one another. Never balanced, top balanced. No BMS. Okay? So how did we do that? How do we get long life out of these cells without the expense of a BMS, without the complexity of a BMS? See, you got to go back to our original, what I was talking about, our original objective. Not original objective, it was, but I mean originally what I spoke of was that a conversion needs to be safe, simple, reliable, and affordable. And one of the things that we find with the BMS, in my experience, is that BMSs fail. There's a fair amount of complexity that goes into a BMS. And so that kind of, complexity is the enemy of reliability. Okay? Famous saying. Complexity is the enemy of reliability. So they're not simple, and in my experience, they're not reliable. We have replaced, this year alone, 3 vehicles in 2021 where we replaced battery packs and removed BMS systems and replaced them with lithium iron phosphate cells, which are the safest chemistry, most reliable chemistry, and we removed the BMS. So it's more affordable. You're not paying for a BMS. I think the least expensive name brand BMS for a small system is over $1,000. So we're hitting on all those points. But we still need to have features we talked about. And so how do we do that? Well, we always put a 12-volt gauge in our conversions. That's how we monitor the 12-volt system. With that single 12-volt gauge, we're now monitoring our complete 12-volt system. We know that our DC to DC converter is working, and we know what our 12-volt battery status is. Okay, don't need anything else. Inexpensive gauge. If it fails, it fails and doesn't affect anything. That's the other thing. With the BMS, you're making an attachment to every single cell. If something fails in that BMS and it affects one of the cells, then that can affect all of the cells or a group of those cells. And you don't want to go down that road. You don't want any of the cells affected. Our instrumentation, all of our monitoring we do at the pack level. So every cell is affected as a group, not individually. So we don't have any differences in the measuring devices that would cause us to want to have to balance again. We don't have that issue. We don't have that problem. The pack is always together as a group. So a couple of things were state of charge calculations. Well, we run instrumentation that does all that for us. Inexpensive, reliable, simple to install, program, so forth. It does our state of charge calculations, gives us, our current in and out, gives us our pack voltage, and gives us our amp hours. Other item was cell over and under voltage. Well, for our under voltage, again, we have instrumentation that shuts this off, and we don't go all the way down to the minimum voltage. We go down to our bottom balancing voltage, always leaving us margin. But this is right here, there's no range there. So we're not losing range, just like we're not losing any range by not charging it up to 3.65 volts or whatever they're currently saying. We're not affecting the range. We're not cheating out any range. And so we protect it from going below that. Not having to measure individual cells, we're measuring pack because we know they're all going to be together at that point. So we get down there, we shut it down. Okay? Now, overcharging is a bigger issue. If you over discharge your pack, you're going to ruin that pack, and it's going to cost you money and hassle. But if you overcharge the pack, you're going to have a really bad day. Because depending on the chemistry you're using, lithium iron phosphate, you're probably not going to have a problem. I mean, you're going to have a problem. You're going to ruin cells and stuff, but you're not going to burn down your house and that kind of thing. But other cell chemistries, you overcharge them. They're going to go into thermal runaway. NMC, I believe, is like 320 degrees Fahrenheit thermal runaway, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I believe lithium iron phosphate's like 512. So big difference, okay? Lithium iron phosphate's a very stable, it's the safest chemistry. It's safer than lead acid. It's the safest chemistry currently available. And so to not overcharge, again, we use two different methods to do that. And I believe we've talked about that in another video. And but we have a redundancy built in. We have two different devices monitoring the upper end so that we don't overcharge. Okay? So we're protected from overcharge and undercharge. Cell balancing, well, we did that before we installed them in the car. We bottom balanced them. Cell charge control, well, I just talked about that. Battery temperature monitoring. Okay. Here's one where we have to add a separate device. And we don't do it because we have to worry about the upper end. The operating temperature of lithium iron phosphate's -4 to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. We don't cool or vent our battery packs at all. I mean, in the early days we did. We were learning like everybody else. And that's how I know what you need to do and not to do, because we've done it lots of times. That repetition, that opportunity to observe. And so we found that these things, even where we are, where we get 121 degrees, we see 118 almost every single summer, at least once. We're in the 110s for 30 days out of every year. And we can put these lithium iron phosphate batteries in a box, no ventilation, they never have an issue. Never even get close to having an issue, even in high ambient temperatures where we are. Okay? So the thing that you need to then be aware of or mindful of is the low end. Like I mentioned before, all your lithium chemistries are the same. You do not want to charge at freezing or below. So we use a separate monitoring device that if the battery pack hits 40 degrees, that's when, if we're using, battery heating or whatever, that's when that kicks in. It's at 40 degrees, and we keep it, at 40 or above. Again, I like a little margin. Why go all the way down to freezing? But our own vehicles here, and we're having a cold winter this year. We've seen 27, 28 degrees. It's still over 40 degrees. Unheated warehouse, big warehouse, metal building. I get here, it's 42 degrees. It was 29 last night. So we're not worried about it where we are, but we do vehicles all over North America. And so depending on where it's going, we will, put in that lower end protection so that you can't charge it at freezing or below. But that's an easy, inexpensive, reliable system to add. Okay, and like I said, with that you can also add, battery heating. So if you have multiple battery boxes, whatever, you can heat those individual battery boxes. And the other is can control. And so all of our stuff currently is not can controlled. It's all controlled, an analog control. And so you still have an option depending on what you want to do. And so if you need can control, there's other ways to deal with it, or you can go with the BMS. But like I said, BMS, there are some issues with dealing with BMS: expense, reliability, complexity, so forth. But if you're going to be dealing with a lot of can controlled stuff, then maybe that's, something that you accept. And the other is system monitoring. Well, we already talked about that. And that's one of the things when you're doing a conversion, we teach you these kinds of things in the workshop, and that is how to check for ground faults, how to protect from having them, after the conclusion of your conversion, how to prevent them in the future, so forth. That's pretty much that list that we had. So, we've given you a little bit of an outline on, cells and batteries, a little bit about their characteristics, charging and discharging. Talked about what a BMS does and whether or not you need to use it. Talked about top balancing or bottom balancing. And so you can do this multiple ways. There's not just one way to do a conversion.